Ladies and gentlemen, in this corner, Eddie Gagnon. And in the opposite corner, Kristen Gagnon. This is What's Special About Special.
I wanted to say that.
Well, hello there. My name's Eddie Gagnon.
Eddie, I don't want to be here all night.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name's Eddie Gagnon. That was perfect. Kristen.
Your voice. Hey, listeners. Instacart is our favorite new shopping tool.
Instacart.
With Instacart, groceries are delivered in as little as 1 hour.
1 hour.
They even have multiple stores available, so you can shop all your favorites on one single order.
All your favorites.
They have the products you love from your local stores.
Local stores?
Instacart highlights deals to help you save money.
Saving money.
And they'll pick the freshest produce and keep all your eggs safe, too.
Fucking fresh.
Listeners, you'll get free delivery on your first order over $35 just by following the link in our show notes. That'll let Instacart know that we sent you, and you get to help support our show.
Instacart. Welcome back, listeners. Today we have Kayleigh Martens. She's an occupational therapist and a blogger. Welcome to the show, Kayleigh.
Hi. Thank you.
We're very welcome.
So excited to have you on.
Super excited. So,
this is super cool.
Yeah, not only, of course, is Kayleigh a guest on today, but we do have a personal relationship with Kayleigh and her husband. So, again, having a friend on is something that I always find exciting.
I know, it's fun. We don't get to do it often.
I know. I feel like the content's just a little more, better.
Interesting.
Wholesome.
I feel like it's fun. It's fun, but at the same time, it's difficult because we have to pretend we don't know the answers to questions that we're asking.
Yeah, but I like that. I feel more comfortable with that because then, I know. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I'll get a good answer out of this. So tell me.
You're funny.
I'm trying.
I love it. So Kayleigh, you're an occupational therapist, right? And then you also started a blog recently. Before we get really into all of that information, tell us a little bit about your personal story. Where are you from? What's your support system? Things like that.
Okay. So I grew up in Rhode Island with my mom and my stepdad mostly. And then my sister Allison and my stepsister Jen. And we I'm very close to my family, which I think makes dealing with anxiety much easier because you don't feel, like you're alone in the world.
Yeah.
So that's always helpful. I didn't really know that I had anxiety and OCD until I was in college. So, I had symptoms that, looking back now, I can say oh, wow. Yeah, it was definitely present in my life far before I was diagnosed with it. Things like being very organized as a kid, which is not super typical. Being really super hard on myself, very stressed about school, wanting to be, perfect all the time and make sure I was the best in my class, that kind of thing. Once I got to college and I actually experienced my first panic attack, that was when everything kind of started to unfold for me.
It came to a head at that point.
Yes. Yes. And of course my mom was not the one genetically who has the anxiety disorder. So it's my dad's side who I'm not overly close to. And so there's a lot of history there that I wasn't privy to before it happened.
Or have that someone to say, oh, I went through this, therefore,
right.
Things like that. It's harder if you've not had a connection with somebody who's gone through the same thing. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, luckily my mom reached out to my dad and was like, hey, Kayleigh's going through this stuff. Is this something that you had or your siblings had? And my dad did say oh yeah, when we turned 19, we all kind of had our first panic attack, which would have been nice to know going into college.
Yeah, you'd be prepared at least, like with a tool set to kind of handle it.
Right. Like, hey, you know what? This is what a panic attack feels like. Like you might have one, maybe you won't, but you know.
In case you do.
So, yeah, in case you do, you might want to know. So that's kind of when everything started for me.
So what got you into occupational therapy?
So I actually went to college to be a speech therapist, and then
which, by the way, Eddie, is different. Right before you came on, I was like explaining. I was like, you know, occupational therapy, and he's like, it's like speech therapy. I was like, it's different. It's different.
Super different. Super different. I worked as a speech therapy assistant after I graduated with my bachelor's, and doing early intervention, which I know you guys are familiar with.
Very.
Yeah. And I hated it. I hated speech therapy. It's like, I loved the kiddos, but I ended up falling in love with the OT that I worked with. Like she was just amazing. And I was like, oh my God, this is so more of like the things. Yeah. Like I love like the body and how it works and how, you know, it's connected to everything that you do. And so I actually, blessing in disguise, didn't get, and I was like devastated. And then I was like, thank God I did it. Cause then I ended up going back for OT instead. It's
probably a sign though. It's like one of those things where if you're not like fully into it, you're not putting it all into it. So it was almost like a sign to say, okay, well, you're not ready for this, or this is not your path. Right. Let's find a different one for you.
Right. That was the universe just guiding you to where you needed to go.
Yeah.
You know,
it's true. It's true. In the moment, it's hard to remember that, but then you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense now.
Yeah. So tell us, for those listeners that don't know, which I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are parents or in the community that have been through occupational therapy at one point or another. But for those who are listening that don't know, what is OT or occupational therapy?
So this is such a hard question to answer because it's so multifaceted, and which is cool. I find that it leaves a lot of space for growth and change. So OT at its basic level is helping people continue to do the things in life that they do to take care of themselves or that they find as being meaningful. So like their routines, their habits, their rituals. And that kind of can break off into a ton of different areas. So there's pediatrics, where we work with kiddos that have developmental disabilities or are born with, disabilities. And then you can be a occupational therapist in the psych world, and you can do geriatric psych. You can do the nursing home, which is where I currently work, which is very basic stuff, like, can you take yourself to the bathroom? Can you put on your own socks and shoes? Can you feed yourself? And then, you can work in a hospital setting with really acute people that have been in car accidents or
like a rehab type situation.
Yeah. Or like veterans. We do a lot of work with amputations and things like that. So because our whole focus is on creating a meaningful life for the person, there's all different areas that we look at.
Right. Oh, I like the way that's put, like that more than just like, oh, we're helping you rehab this area of your body or something. It's more, let's make your life meaningful, which I think is huge, especially if you have a disability or, like you said, if there's an amputation or something. Yeah. It's real easy to just go, there's a lot I can't do. And that's my world. Absolutely. I can't. And I'm and it is limiting, but we've seen some great occupational therapists that have really, even just given Eddie the mindset, or giving us the mindset to say, okay, he can do more. Let's get that going, where we might not have done that.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are amazing. And Eddie is like just a kick-ass kid. So
every time though someone says that, I'm like, it's from day one, right in the beginning, we had the best therapists. Like,
that's awesome.
And that is a true testament to like who we were working with in early intervention. Like we're huge proponents for early intervention, because getting in there right from the start, it does just like adjust your mindset.
Yeah. Because I think we live in a world too where everything is sickness based or symptom based, where it's like, you know, okay, you don't feel good, so either here's a pill or here, like, this is how we treat this instead of treating the whole person.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So like you mentioned, there's kind of like focuses or specialties to each area of occupational therapy. Which specialty or focus are you a part of?
So I'm currently trying to make my way into more of the holistic realm of occupational therapy. I'm taking a course right now on how to integrate nutrition and treating mental health disorders. So I've personally experienced the benefits of changing my nutrition and how that has helped my anxiety. And so, and I think nutrition is an underutilized form of medicine and form of care. So
for sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping to break into helping people that have mental health disorders live the best life that they can live while managing the things that they struggle with.
Right. Oh, I like that. I think I didn't even think of that as a area in a way. Like you think of them as two separate things.
Right.
And you think of the holistic route as one, and then you think of therapies like occupational therapy, physical therapy, all of those things as another, but really they are so intertwined. They're working with your body, they're working with your mind. You know, they're kind of trying to connect everything. Like, so I think that's really cool. And nutrition is huge, I think, when it comes to your body. I mean, we were just talking about this the other day. Like, you don't realize, like, if you have poor nutrition, how many organs and everything get affected. And if one organ is affected, it's affecting another organ. You know, your brain is affected if, you know, your kidneys aren't working well, or, you know, it's crazy how interconnected our body is.
And we are what we eat, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like, you know, the smallest thing can be off and it can, you know, trigger this domino effect in your body and, you know, make everything feel like garbage.
Yep.
I mean, I've said this before, but like, it's huge in this house. Like, I switched to a gluten-free diet because I wasn't feeling well all the time. And my doctor finally just said, just try this and see if you're, you know, having some adverse reactions to gluten. And I have had and dealt with anxiety since I was a child, like a young child, maybe 4. Yeah. And that was just my norm. This is what I have. And these are my, you know, and I deal with the symptoms. I just deal with it after the fact. And then when I switched the diet, it wasn't even for that fact. It was for stomach issues and other things. And little did I know that all that anxiety and panic attacks had faded. I mean, I'll still have moments, but totally different than it was all the time, almost every day. If I had to go to the grocery store or a crowded place or anything, there was a way I had to deal with that. And now it's such a different world, all because I've just changed a small portion of my diet. Well, a large portion, but
but it's manageable for you. You know? And
exactly.
I think that's something too that people aren't willing to change their diet because they're like, oh, it's going to be too hard. And it can be at first, but when you feel the benefits for yourself from having made that change, you're like, oh, it's worth it. Like, it's totally worth the meal prep or the, you know, bringing your own pita pocket to a party or whatever it is, you know, like, because it's going to make you feel good.
Right. And, you know, at first it's like, I think the biggest thing I hear is the cost. Like, it's too much money to change my diet. And that's because they make cheap food cheap. Like, it's crap food. It's cheap. It's easy to get. Like, that's why they make it that way. But we have in this house, like, we've just found ways to find inexpensive alternatives so that we can eat the same. And gluten-free, I think people think like, oh, I have to find alternative bread. Or you could just not use bread. You know, and you could eat, you know, I can eat salads and I can eat proteins and I can eat almost everything on the plate except for pasta and bread. Most of my meals, and I still have those things occasionally, you know, I'll use the gluten-free breads or the gluten, but I'll even notice if I eat that too much, I'm not feeling well. Because it's still also just full of fillers. Yeah. It's not any different than the bread you get at the grocery store. It's just a different combination of things. So, I mean, there's definitely ways to do it inexpensively. It's obviously easier like in the summer when you can bulk up on farm produce. Exactly. But, you know, we find alternatives here and the whole house just started eating it.
Right. Oh, my Adam is like, he'll eat anything I make, you know, and I don't think he's ever said to me like, oh, this tastes horrible. Like he's like, oh, this is good. Yeah. Like, you know,
it's food to them.
Super great to have somebody that's supportive in, you know, trying a new lifestyle or diet or, you know,
I think awesome.
It's like, yeah, it's expensive, but you have to think about if you hadn't made that change, well, you know, now are you going to the doctor more often to, you know, treat the symptoms? Are you taking medication that costs money? Are you, you know, like,
or has your lifestyle changed? Like that comes at a cost. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that we've had to adjust what's going on in the day because I would be anxious to go somewhere or do something.
Yeah.
Right.
And little did I know it was really just like from the way I look at it, is like, it was the fear of being sick at a location or not knowing how my body was going to feel and what was going to happen. It was that fear. That's what was causing more anxiety. I mean, yes, Absolutely. I still get some anxiety in general, like generalized anxiety, but it's a different feeling than that. Like, I cannot go to this place because we're going to be in a line for an hour and there's maybe not a bathroom close. And 99% of the time I didn't need the bathroom, but it was like the anxiety was then like filling the stomach anxiousness, which was then, it was just like a cycle. And it's definitely been a huge difference since we've just changed our nutrition in the house. And the kids seem to just have more energy. Well, some of them have more energy all the time. I don't know if food makes a difference.
Right. Well, and it's true. Like, so for, I kind of cut out sugar. Recently I tried keto in June and, I met with my doctor and my body was having a hard time, metabolizing carbs. And they were like, you know, do you have diabetes in your family? And I was like, no, like I'm super active. Like I've always been healthy. I've never had this problem. And, she said, sometimes people's bodies just don't metabolize things as well as other people. So, I cut back a little on carbs and, started using like stevia and then, the sweetener that they use in the keto diet, which is Swerve or like erythritol. Mm-hmm. And what a difference, like, because my body wasn't having the insulin spikes throughout the day anymore. My anxiety was like even keel, like throughout the day. Wow. And I probably noticed maybe within like a month, like I was like, all of a sudden I was like, you know, I don't have like my afternoon crash or like my nighttime anxiety or, you know, like it was really interesting how it worked.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could cut out sugar. I have a problem with desserts and snacks and chocolate and candy. I just have a problem. I'm aware of it.
Yes.
I'm not quite ready to give that up yet. I mean, it's dangerous. I know that every day at 2 I crash, but
yeah.
Well, that's how I was. I'd be like, all right, I need my afternoon chocolate, my afternoon coffee.
Eddie will come home. He's like, you ate that whole bag of chocolate? I'm like, no.
We had a previous guest send us a box full, like a box full.
No, like a box, like
hefty.
When we say a box
full,
he's listening. I know
of chocolate and of candy essentially. Like
here's the backstory
from London.
I'm obsessed with British chocolate. I think it's so much better than American chocolate. It tastes better, hands down. And he lives in Britain and sent us this insanely.
We had like the Cadbury collection.
It had everything.
We had like,
and of course I'm like, I have to try one of everything.
Yeah.
And it's open, so I might as well eat the rest of it.
The biscuits, there's, I forgot the name of them. They're like
Tesco biscuits.
They're the ones in the green package. Like they were like,
they're like
amazing.
A coconut shortbread, and they're so good.
Like there's like little flakes of coconut in them. So like when you're eating it and you get down to like the last little bits of it, just bite through it. Oh my God, they were amazing.
Not nutritious, but it's tough. Like I was like, I'm just gonna have a bite of it.
She's been killing that box, like killing it. And like we were out yesterday, and she's like, "Oh my God!" She's like, "I don't feel good." This and that. She's like, "I ate so much candy," and it's just like, dude, stop. And every time I come home, it rifled through again. Like she'll like organize it on the countertop. Somebody went through it again.
Okay, in my defense, it's not just me.
It's
Annabella.
just her.
No, Annabella also, but yes, I am the biggest culprit. Anyways, so nutrition is, we do try to eat healthy here, or eat well for our bodies, but occasionally
we eat healthy
indulge
enough to counteract the unhealthy stuff that we eat.
Yes. Oh, and I am not nutritionally perfect by any means. I certainly like my, like desserts, and definitely splurge on ice cream. Ice cream is my be all end all favorite thing in the whole entire world.
Well, I think that's important though, especially if you're trying to change your diet for your health and it feels extreme to you, there needs to be some sort of cheat or you're not going to do it properly. You're just going to quit.
Exactly.
So you need to have a balance. Yeah. I think that's important.
One thing is not going to make all the work you've done up to that point erased.
Exactly.
It's your body is miraculous that way, and it'll, rev it up and metabolize it, and it'll be fine.
So to take a shift a little bit, tell us about your blog and, what got you started.
Sure. So the blog is called The OT with OCD. I bought the plan for working on the blog online in June of 2020, and total learning curve because I've never done anything other than Facebook or Instagram. But I just felt like there are so many people that I've met in my life, friends, coworkers, that will end up telling me oh yeah, I've had anxiety since I was young, or, I haven't felt good in this way or that way. And I've been through so much and learned so much through the treatment that I've done and the, actions that I've taken to take care of myself, that I felt like being an OT and the personal experience that I have, I felt like maybe I could actually help other people that are going through this kind of stuff and help them realize that it's not as rare as they themselves feel. It's actually very common. It's just not talked about because people often feel like I'm crazy for feeling this way, or this isn't normal, or so I kind of just started playing around on it. And Adam has been amazing, and he was like, you need to just publish it. You need to just do it and get it out there, and then kind of go from there. And so I just decided to hit publish, and then I'm happy that I did. I think that I've gotten some really great messages from people I don't know, people I do know, and I hope that it continues to help anybody, really.
I think it's great. It's honestly written. It's very open. It's like a breath of fresh air when you're reading your experiences and connecting it to, your world now. It's like, you talk about your experiences when you were younger and connect it to how your life is now. And I think it's good. It's nice for anyone who, even if they don't have, OCD specifically, but can share similar experiences and see a connection to their lives, I think is huge. It's important, I think, especially when it comes to anxieties, things like that affect the brain, that people just think, oh, it's in your head, or, oh, you're doing it because of X, Y, or Z. It's something that you've built into yourself versus, no, this is a wiring issue, or it's a chemical issue, or, where I think, mental health issues, it sounds so negative because of all of the stigmas and everything that gets put into the press. And, you hear, oh, someone shot a school. It's because they had a mental health issue. It's so negative. And yes, they have some issues, but the issues that they're not being spoken to or taken care of for. And I think
it shows there's a gap in the system that allows people to fall through these cracks.
For sure.
And so obviously there's
no support.
See a need, fill a need. When you see that void, that is just a call to action for, something to be done.
Exactly.
Right. I think people are very afraid to, voice how they're feeling if they, when they feel things like this. And that's kind of where it starts, as far as, going deeper and deeper and deeper into this dark place, before being able to get help, unfortunately.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it is, because it's a tricky thing, with mental health or, any kind of disability, anything that affects you that is what we say a lot, like an invisible disability. It is so much harder to get the support you need because it isn't right there out there. And sometimes you don't even know you're going through something. You know, it just seems like your life is different. You know, everyone's got something, therefore, but it's not always true. And sometimes you need a little more support and connection with somebody who has more knowledge than you do. Whatever that looks like, whether that's medication or holistically or, you know, a therapist, or, you know, a psychiatrist, anything. I think that it's really important to know that like all of those resources are out there. And I mean, that is kind of why we started the podcast. Like we want to make sure we get every resource possible out there because someone might just not know they need one.
Right.
Until they hear about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So sometimes you don't know what you need.
Exactly.
Yep. I was 34 years old before I actually, you know, now I'm prescribed for Adderall.
Yeah, and, for ADHD. You know,
that's amazing.
But I mean,
because Adam,
it's kind of like again, like honestly, like hearing Adam.
Well, I could have told you 15 years ago.
I know, and that's my thing. Like it was more of I was just stubborn, but also like nervous. When you talk about things like Adderall and coming from where we grew up and in the background that I have, like addiction is a thing that just scares the shit out of me. So when it comes to somebody saying, hey, you can take this, you know, this medication, but you might get addicted as well. Well, they don't say that. They say that directly. They're like, you know, just let you know you can get addicted to this. And I'm like, well, that's very scary.
Yeah. And at first you were saying, I'm going to take less than what they want me to take because I'm nervous. And I was like, take what they wouldn't be prescribing a specific medication for you if they didn't think that would work for you. And I can't like tell you how many times I've heard them say like, well, if this one doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Right. I know.
You know, there is alternatives. Right. And so I think it is scary. I think it's scarier when you have kids because a lot of these medications are made for adults. And so it is nerve-wracking when you see friends that when you grew up with that started on these types of medications and end up with addiction issues. But it's possible they could have had addiction issues either way. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that they correlate together, but it does change your brain. It does do those things. So I get now that you're an adult, I feel like it is affecting you and treating you so much more efficiently.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also accompanied by, you know, like a therapist, a psychiatrist.
Right. Oh, I'm glad you said that.
You know, and then like, because previously before that, the only thing that I had was self-medication. And we all know that that's not great because you're not monitoring. There's no consistency and there's nothing that's there.
Right.
It's my concept of me thinking that I'm handling a situation or managing a situation.
Oh, that's key. Like I think how many times that, you know, just from being on the outside and married to you and being with you all the time, to just be like, I can't tell you how many times I was like, I need you to focus. And like, I think I said, I need you to focus.
Yes.
Like today is a perfect example because you don't necessarily take it on the weekends because it's not necessary.
If there's no appointments or anything.
Yeah, there's no reason.
Adam is notorious for not taking it on Sundays.
Yeah, which is fine.
Sundays is because Sundays is football time and I'm just like.
Yeah. And it's fine. Yeah. Like you shouldn't have to take it on the weekends.
Right.
It's meant to take so that you know, can focus on the tasks at hand at work and things like that. I don't think you'd be as successful starting your own business if you hadn't taken those steps. And I think that's a huge factor. But, you know, for someone that's been on the outside watching you, like today's a perfect day where I was like, I need you to be focused. Are you listening? Like, let's do this. Yeah. Like, I think I repeat that a lot. And it did have an effect on our marriage, on our relationship when you weren't medicated. So I think it's made a huge difference. You know, it's made parenting a lot easier. It's made all of those things a lot easier.
Because you're like, I want you to be my partner, not another child.
Something to manage.
Manage. Right. Because I would do that with Adam. I'd be like, I'd shut the TV off. I'd be like, okay, are you listening to me? Yeah. Like, are we having a conversation? You know?
Exactly.
And then he started getting medication, like, I don't know, probably like 6 years ago now. But it made such a difference. Like,
and it doesn't change. I think like the misconception is that it's going to change your personality or it's going to change how much fun you are. Like, I think a perfect example is Adam and Eddie. Like they're still going to be the children that they are. They're still going to be fun. Eddie has, full energy all the time. That doesn't change with the medication.
No.
The medications calming his anxiety of needing to get 50 things done.
I was going to say,
speaking of anxiety, like it is another correlation.
The biggest thing, and that's honestly the only reason why I feel like it has a benefit on the weekends too, because the nighttime worries, like the anxiety, and like that's all day Sunday too. So because during the day, like I'm only taking it for during work, midday, and then at nighttime, I feel no need to take my medication. But sometimes, like it's like 10 o'clock at night. Now it's completely out of my system, and I can potentially get a panic attack.
Or he's up all night. Yeah, exactly.
Which is really, really, and those are the things that like I'm going to try to manage through. And that's where it's like talking to a therapist, is the addition to it, and then changing my diet, making sure that, because as you talked about, like there's a lot of sugar, there's a lot of carbohydrates in my system, which then break down into sugars
exactly.
And so that's a big problem of mine. And I feel like fixing that would be a great addition to these small steps that I'm taking to just better manage myself.
Absolutely. But I think all those little steps end up making the difference that you need, Yeah.
But Adam, because I did have that, me and Adam talked about it all the time, especially when we were driving.
We're just blowing Adam right into this. I feel poor Adam.
Well, I love him. Well, because he was one of my first like people that I was like actually able to talk to, where Adam doesn't have like a big addiction background or like like for lack of a better terminology, like criminal background, like kind of like mischievous background.
Okay, I was gonna say you're not a criminal, but
you know what I mean, like, and so to
you guys
hear
came from different backgrounds,
right? And to hear him say, "No, this is what worked for me" and stuff, and I'm like, cool, because this is somebody who I feel like we are like we're absolutely on the same wavelengths and stuff. So to hear him, I trust what he's saying, and Adam's not taking it for anything other than better himself. So that was always like, and then when Kristen kept being persistent about it, that's where it's just like, okay, like, and I remember having the conversation with her about that too. Like, they talked about this, and I remember talking to Adam and stuff. And then I have a very close friend of mine that kind of shed a lot of light on it too. So I was like, all right, let's see how this works. And, so those are good things.
So tell us about OCD specifically. How does it affect you? How does it affect others? Is it kind of the same for everybody, or does it vary?
So OCD is something that, so I actually originally thought, I just had like a generalized anxiety disorder. And OCD is very interesting in that it can kind of change throughout your life. In one of my blog posts, I talked about when I was little, I would lay in bed at night and I would like say out loud, like, good night, Mom, good night, like to my grandma, like everybody in my life that like was important to me. And I said these, I would say them out loud because I felt like if I didn't, they were going to die or something bad was going to happen to them. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of like manifested into, being super, super neat. So like my bed had to be made and like nobody could sit on my bed. And the reason behind that, I don't think was very clear to me at that age. I was like, 9 maybe. I just knew that it made me really upset. Like it made me inside like so angry and like mad. And then it definitely extended into my schoolwork and wanting to be like, super, super, top of my class. I don't know if it, like had something to do with like how I felt about myself, my worthiness, my, success rate.
Right.
And then as I got older, I started learning more about it because I haven't written about it yet, but one of the major areas of OCD is harm OCD, which is where you either fear harming yourself or harming somebody that's important to you. And
how scary.
It's very scary. And what I've learned through therapy is that OCD attacks the things that mean the most to you. So, like a lot of moms postpartum will have fears of hurting their baby. And it's not because they actually want to hurt their baby. It's because they're so in love with their baby that their biggest fear is anything happening to their baby. And for me, I've always been I love life. Like I want to live to be 110. Like I've always been like that. And within the last 5 years or so, my fear has turned into this fear of harming myself, which was a really terrifying experience. So I've worked a lot with my therapist on.
Now, does that have some connection? I feel like, it seems like it's in a form of needing to have a control over a situation. Like when you mentioned that, having that idea of postpartum of, I'm afraid I might hurt my child. It seems like, well, yeah, that would make sense in a way. Like if you have something that's saying I have to control these situations, and then having an infant is uncontrollable. So no doubt that you would be afraid that something might happen. And then you add on to that it would be at your hand or your doing. You need to try to feel the need to control that at all times. That fear of loss of that control.
Right. It basically comes down to it. And it's a fear of loss of control, a fear of, not always having the crystal ball answer that you want. And I read something that was really cool in when I was learning about the whole harm thing. And it was this guy saying do you have thoughts and fears of harming yourself? And the person he was talking to was like, yes. And then he said, well, do you also have thoughts about living? And he was like, oh, all the time. I'm so excited to go here and there and do this and that and have kids. And he was like, so it's learning how to reframe your thoughts and realizing that the thoughts are trying to make you afraid. But they're not, the thoughts are not you, but it's a huge, undertaking because it's something you kind of have to work on all the time.
Right.
Yeah. It's a constant,
your typical mind frame, the way that you
rewiring your brain.
It's I look at this and what do I think about? And it's well, no, before you start thinking about what do I think about when I look at that, you have to understand that, let me reconstruct that. That's to have that idea before you approach that situation. That's got to be just very difficult to start, because that's how you'd start training yourself there.
It must be easily misdiagnosed because, like you said, to say, oh, do you have thoughts of harming yourself? It's going to put you in one diagnosis. But if you then rephrase it and say, well, but do you have thoughts of living? And maybe figuring out where those thoughts are stemming from. If you don't do that, I can imagine you can easily misdiagnose having OCD.
Right. Well, and I said that to my therapist, I was so upset. And I said, these thoughts have never come into my mind, until, later in my life. And she said that the key for her in looking at someone who is, has OCD or who has major depressive disorder, she said someone that is depressed and is actually, having suicidal ideations or that kind of thing, it doesn't cause them anxiety. It tends to, there's a lack of emotion associated with it or a sense of calm associated to it. Whereas, she's like, you are so upset about it, which is basically indicating that this is exactly what you don't want.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this very backwards, complicated way of your mind trying to protect you from the things that you fear.
That must, though, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but hearing that must also, though, kind of flip it on its head a little bit and make it feel a little bit more manageable. Because I can imagine if you're in the other way, you're thinking, oh no, I have this major depression, I'm going further down this hole, where will I end up? Versus someone saying, listen, this is your mind protecting you. And then all of a sudden it kind of flips it to a more, not necessarily positive, but something that must seem more manageable in a way, something that can be helped. Yeah. You can work on yourself.
Yes. When you start to I still see my therapist at least once a month for a while. You know, if I'm having like a rougher time, I'll see her every 2 weeks or whatever. But learning the patterns that your brain starts to take, like now, like, for example, like Adam has said to me, you know, everybody has scary thoughts. Like, he's like, I've had thoughts where you're driving on the bridge and you're like, what if I drove my car like off the bridge right now? The difference is that someone with OCD hangs on to that thought and they're like, oh my God, does that mean I want to drive my car off the bridge? Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody who doesn't have those chemical imbalances in their brain that, you know, just kind of goes out the other ear and they continue with their life. But we kind of try to make meaning out of that one thought, and it ends up spiraling. So learning to, you know, have a thought like that. And like now, one of the main things that I say to myself is like, okay, brain, like, I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm okay. I don't need you to protect me right now. Or like, you know, so it's learning what works for you to manage those kinds of symptoms. Well,
I think it's important, like how you're acknowledging your view of OCD, what you've gone through, because I think classically what people think of when they hear OCD is, oh, someone who has to brush their teeth this many times, or somebody that has to put deodorant 12 times on each side, like, because that's what we've seen on TV, or that's what you've seen in documentaries, and that probably because that's the easiest way to physically show an explanation of, you know, a classic OCD, but the fact that there are so many other layers to it that can affect you in unseen ways that even someone who has it might not know, I think is really important, because it's probably very easy to just go, oh, you're like, for even a parent or for anyone around to just go, oh, well, you don't have OCD because you don't have X, Y, or Z happening.
Right. And it's crazy because they kind of, everybody's form of OCD kind of links back to the control thing, where it's like somebody who is afraid of germs and washes their hands, like, you know, an insane amount of times during the day. At the root of that is still that fear of not being able to control whether or not they get sick or they get some, you know, horrible disease that causes them to get sick and die. Like, it kind of always goes back to trying to protect themselves and have control over their life in some way, shape, or form.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
So, you know, as someone who is medically trained in a way, you have, you know, you've been through this world as well. Do you see something like OCD as a mental health issue, as a disability, as a special need, all of the above? Like, how do you kind of look at it?
So it's taken me a while to accept, you know, that it's part of my being. It's part of who I am. I definitely think it is, I tend to look at it as a mental health disorder, because I think I look at it as if you can treat the brain, it kind of helps you treat everything else. So if your brain is healthy, you know, that's going to, like, if you mentally feel well, you're going to feel well enough to exercise, which is going to make your hormones feel good and, you know, be activated the way they're supposed to. I think it can be a disability. I've been written out of work before. So I definitely, I think any disorder can become a disability if it's not treated and not cared for the way it needs to be.
I think that's a good, I mean, I think so many times, me and Eddie have talked about this a couple times, but like, it's kind of a blurry line sometimes between a disability, a mental health issue. They're not all mental health issues that can be disabilities, and there's not all disabilities that are obviously mental health issues. But I think for society to take something, I guess on a parental side, for society to take something serious enough so that it can be accepted to have actions towards it, unfortunately has to fall in a category that is acceptable. Right. And I think right now we live in a time where like disabilities or special needs are more not accepted, but are granted more leeway to get support systems than mental health. Yes. And when people think mental health, they just think someone who snapped or, you know, quote unquote, someone who snapped or whatever, instead of, hey, everyone's brain's not working, just like everyone's leg might not be working the same, or everyone's, you know, arm might not be working the same. And I think I on our side, and sometimes we're not as politically correct as we should be, but I think it's okay for everything to kind of be lumped together. Yeah. If it means a positive, like if you're going to get more support, if there's going to be more support and more awareness, then lump it together so that we can bring awareness to things so that everyone can have the support and the resources that they need.
Right.
Absolutely.
Unless you're breast cancer.
You can call.
They've got a lot.
You can call your boss and say, hey, like I broke my leg. I got to be out of work. But if you call and say, hey, you know what, my medication for my OCD is like not working really well, like I have to be out of work. The difference in the way that you're looked at, unfortunately, still exists.
Oh, for sure. And they might say, okay, but there are definitely employers that's going to affect maybe their growth in the company or, you know, future things, because at some point someone's like, oh, remember though, they were out for a week because, and it's looked at as if like they're lazy. Yeah. Versus when the reality is someone's
there's a flaw right. Exactly. And it's not, because in my opinion, there's been times where I've presented the idea of you have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge what they're saying, because that's, in my opinion, a cry for help and things like that. And that was looked at as a weakness in management. You know, it's like, no, you can't, you don't do that. You have to, you know, like convince them to keep pushing themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't do that though, because if somebody is willing to take that step to say, listen, I got to fix this. In my opinion, me as a human, the best thing I can do is receive that and say, you're right.
Absolutely.
I was like,
plus it's only 100%. Benefiting the business side.
Everybody.
If
you have somebody going to look for help, they're getting the help. You're getting a positive change out of that person. They're coming back to you. I'm sure there's going to be an amount of gratitude, which that's again, things that I've received in managing and doing that. Like you see that people come back and be like, thank you. Well, I know you could have taken that 2 ways. I just appreciate that so much. I just needed that time. You got it.
Well, on the flip side, you have a chance you may lose a valuable employee because they cannot perform to the way they need because they just need a break. Yep. Mental health days are important. Oh. And I mean, it's crazy that it's not built in.
Right. Like if you had shut that person down, now the likelihood of them, you know, speaking out to get the support that they need in another way, you know, they may never do it.
Or the next employer.
Right. And now you've got this person that never gets treated and, you know, who knows what happens, you know?
I think there's a responsibility factor there as for sure.
Yes.
Well,
agreed.
We have responsibility as humans to be compassionate
to your neighbor. Yeah.
We like, I don't know if it is like if that is a personality trait. I know it is because there is things like sociopaths and things like out there.
Yeah.
But the idea that for me, one, it feels extremely good to do something nice for somebody or just do the good deed. But also like I almost get sick if I see an opportunity and I don't take advantage of it.
That is not even
like
that's like minimizing how your reaction is when you think you could, like someone's pulled over on the side of the road with a flat tire. It's like, it takes everything you have to not pull over, even if there's 3 other people pulled over. Like, it's like you.
And Kristen's like, they're fine. They're fine. You can go. You can go.
I'm like the opposite. I probably am a sociopath.
Are you
like,
guys
whatever.
Okay?
I don't think I've stopped ever in my life. I'm probably the sociopath in your example where I'm like,
somebody else will help them. And that's the idea, is that for me, that is a gut-wrenching feeling to leave it up to somebody else. Like, if you're there.
And I mean, it amazes me. I work in healthcare, and the lack of empathy and compassion that I come across in,
I bet,
you know, various people that I've worked with, or, you know, I'm like, how are you in this profession? And you have, you know, and it's easy to become numb to things like people's complaints of pain. You know, you're like, yeah, okay, Mrs. Smith, like you've had pain for, you know, whatever. Yeah. But sometimes that that explanation of pain is completely unrelated to the pain and it's something else. So I think it's so important to try to ask other questions like, well, how did you eat today? Or how did you sleep? Or, how are you feeling? Like, are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling sad? Like, and, sometimes that frustration manifests into pain. Like it's not so easily explained all the time.
Well, I think it's a perfect example. It's like if you had an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old or whatever, a child doing the same thing, you'd investigate before you just said either no or took them to the doctor. Like there's one extreme or the other. But usually as a parent, you're saying like, well, you've had headaches before. Do you think it could be because you didn't drink enough water? Like, let's talk this out versus just being like, here's a Tylenol.
Exactly.
So like,
exactly.
Even though it's funny how we like, we do something with kids and then at some point we just kind of stop. As someone becomes an adult, we just assume that they'll be fine. Like it's just not how it works, you know?
Right.
No.
Now, do you think there should be more awareness or do you think there's enough awareness specifically for like kids going through the same thing because they're so young and they're so unaware of their feelings and what's going on with them and their bodies?
I was lucky to have an amazing mom that was very present and very, there, paying attention to her children. But I think even the best parents, if neither parent has ever had an anxiety disorder or a mental health disorder, or maybe like, their great grandfather did, but nobody ever talked about it. I don't feel that, OCD specifically, is talked about as much, especially in children. I think it can easily be looked at as anxiety, but treating OCD is different than treating, just an anxiety disorder. So I definitely think it could be included more in, whether it's primary care or, somehow explain that, these are things you might see in kids that have OCD or, cause I think, had I not had the mom that I had, I may not have gotten, to the type of care that I needed.
For sure. Right. Yeah. I think there's definitely, see it sometimes in our experiences, like there's a lack sometimes, and even like the school system, and not that the school system is responsible for medical, support, but a lot of times we've heard the rhetoric even with Eddie, and it's a physical disability. Well, if it's not affecting his class, like if he can hold a pencil and if he can walk upstairs, he's good, doesn't need any therapies. And we're like, well, you're the only people we can get this support from. And it does affect him. If he feels that his body moves incorrectly or he's not feeling like he's walking correctly, he can't catch up with with the line. Yeah, that doesn't affect his education, but it's definitely affecting his social skills, which will affect his education at some point.
Exactly.
And so something like this, I can imagine for sure, if you're in a classroom and you're having anxiety and you have some OCD tendencies or anything as a child, and that's not being recognized in the classroom because they're getting straight A's because this is the child that has to have straight A's. The answer is probably, well, they get great grades. So
yep.
Exactly. And, kids want to be accepted. They want to be liked by their classmates, and to feel internally not good about the way you feel and feeling like, well, nobody really understands me. And like, my classmates think I'm weird or, it's just not, that just sets them up for further, challenges.
For sure. Right. For sure. So we ask all our guests the same thing. If you had a few moments to speak to our community, what advice would you give them?
I think the best thing I can say is that what is right for one person is not right for the other. So I think it's so important to pay attention to your own body and, not go off of like what you see online or what other people say works for them. I think you have to take the time to really look into what's going to work for you and get the right supports and, work on you. Don't be, affected by other people because, everybody's different, and that's okay, you know?
Oh, I think that's great. I mean, it is perfect advice when it comes to anything, you know, in general. It's just really like, you've got to know what is going to work for you and not just say, oh, well, so-and-so is doing that, so that's going to work for me. And then when it doesn't, you just feel devastated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So for the blog, I mean, it's really awesome. I get like excited every time there's another post. How would you like to see the blog grow in what ways?
So I think I'm working on this class right now on the whole linking nutrition to treating mental health. So I'm really, I would love to start to use the blog for ways to teach people, you know, depending on what disorder they may have or what issues they might be having, how they can use nutrition to try to sort those things out. And so far, the class is fascinating. I'm only on module 3. I have like 10 more modules to go. But, so I definitely would love to link up with that, and also continue to show that occupational therapy can do these things, and, you know, make occupational therapy more than, you know, someone that gives you arm exercises or helps you go to the bathroom, you know? Right. So I definitely think those are like my main directions.
Oh, I think that would be great. I mean, right now, I think especially like our generation and the generation coming after us, they're looking more at alternative treatments for things and in general, even just in general, how they can keep their body healthy, strong. Like quality of life over quantity of life almost seems the most important thing right now. Like I think our generation's always looking for quantity. That's why they want more days off. That's why they're willing to work from home and work on a Sunday, but have a Monday. Like they want to be able to bank vacation days and put in 60 hours a week because quality is more important to them if they can get a 3-week vacation and really shut their brain down. Yeah. And I think it's something that's not always, you know, recognized when it's like, oh, that person just wants 3 weeks. It's like, no, they are prioritizing their life. They're going to work for you 110%. Yep. But they want that, you know.
But they're going to want what they need or what they feel like is the and a lot of that servicing to keep that going.
Exactly. And I think a lot of that is to find ways to kind of recenter, reset, take care of your body. They're always going to the gym. You know, I say they because I'm right on the cusp of that generation and I clearly don't do any of those things. But in my mind, I'm like, I'd love to go to the gym all the time and take care of me. But I think it is, you know, definitely a trend that is a good trend, not one of those trends you're like, oh, it's just a trend. It's like, no, this is a good trend. I hope it keeps going. And connecting that is great.
I think people put too much emphasis on, like, when you say you have a day off, people are like, oh, well, that must be nice. It's like, yeah, it is nice. Like, I deserve a day off. Like, it shouldn't be seen as like this lazy thing. Like, I think go is not something to applaud all the time.
Well, we're not physically made up for that. That's pretty obvious.
No, absolutely.
That's awesome. So where can everyone find the blog website, social media? Where can they find it?
So if you just type in the OT with OCD.com, it should come up like on Google. And then if you find me on Facebook, it's Kayleigh Martens. I believe my maiden name is in parentheses, which is McKitchen. So, and I usually link my posts on there as well.
Perfect. So we'll definitely link, the website, stuff like that, so our listeners can check it out for you and definitely connect with you if they've got questions or anything like that.
Yes, please.
I'm super excited for what's to come and
yeah, I know. Thank you so much. This is so cool.
Thanks for coming on. I'm super pumped that we were able to set it up.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Awesome. Well, you have a great day.
All right. You too.
You don't really have to hang up. It's so awkward.
That's just where I edit it. Right there.
Yeah. Click.
Well, thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, please make sure you share with a friend and leave a review.
You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode on our Facebook or Instagram on @specialaboutspecial. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.